Park and Rec Board meeting. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from our December meeting?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Tammy, announcements.
Announcements. Board of Commissioner meetings will take place Monday, January 23rd and Monday, February 13th at the Radnor Township building at 7 o'clock p.m. The next Parks and Recreation Board meeting will take place on Thursday, February 9th at 6:30 p.m. at the Willows Mansion. The Recreation Department Winter and Spring 2012 activities brochure and the Winter Radnor Township newsletter are now available and up on the website at radnor.com. The PRPS discount ticket program is now available, including discount tickets to area attractions such as ski resorts, movie theaters, and the Adventure Aquarium. The Manager's Challenge New Year, New You Wellness Series at Wayne Arts Center had a topic this week, Lighten Up, which was held on Wednesday, and upcoming topics will include Love Your Heart, and that will take place on Wednesday, February 8th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. The next topic after that will be Live Healthy for Life Long Term, which will be held on Wednesday, April 11th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. Hoops from the Heart basketball clinic will take place at Cabrini College on Monday, January 16th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. That's on Martin Luther. The Daddy-Daughter Dance, the first Daddy-Daughter Dance, will take place on Friday, February 10th from 6:30 to 8 o'clock p.m. at the Willows Mansion for Valentine's Day. The Summer Camp Open House for Radnor Day Camp and Summer Tot Lot will take place at the Radnor Township Building on Tuesday, March 13th, all day, and then in the evening from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. For a listing of more of our department's activities and township information, please visit the website at radnor.com.
Okay, anybody have any questions on Tammy's announcements? Okay, why don't we jump down to new business with the election of the president or the chair and the vice chair for the Park and Recs Board this upcoming year with the turn of the calendar. Anybody want to make a nomination for the chair?
I'd like to nominate Fenton Fitzpatrick for chair.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Okay, how about for vice chair?
I'll nominate Mike Glenn
Great.
for vice chair.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Thank you.
That passes. Thank you very much. Tammy, why don't we do the activities report? It looks like, John, you're waiting. Okay, that's fine. Why don't we jump into activities report?
The activities report for December 2011, the Recreation and Community Programming Department had 11 programs up and running successfully during the month of December, along with one trip that took place to New York City and one event, which was the annual Holiday at the Willows event, which was on Sunday, December 11th, and we estimate that we had over 400 participants take part. This outstanding event included tremendous volunteer efforts from the Radnor Girl Scouts, who offered holiday-related ornament and craft making for the children who attended. There was also a juggler and magician, music, face painting, balloon sculpting, and of course Santa Claus. We'd like to take a minute just to say thank you to TD Bank for helping to make this event possible with their monetary sponsorship in the amount of $1,500, along with the following additional sponsors: Hers, who contributed bags of popcorn, Ithan Food Market contributed a tray of cookies, and Wawa contributed juice beverages. Thanks again to all those generous sponsors for all their help with the program. We had a holiday break basketball camp that was unfortunately canceled due to low enrollment, and in its place we had offered a day of the open gym program at Radnor Activity Center. And we had tremendous success with this event. We had a volunteer actually come out and help us run the program. We had over 30 participants that took part, and everybody had a great time playing a variety of games and sports. In addition to trying to continue to offer this program in the future, in anticipation of offering this program in the future, we're actually evaluating additional ways to how we can fund it by minimizing the expenses such as utilizing volunteers as we did during holiday break, and actually looking into sponsorship opportunities to be able to fund the operating expenses towards the program. So we're hoping to work a lot of those out for future months to come, particularly in the middle of March once basketball wraps up in the facility. The Radnor Youth Basketball Program currently has 1,064 participants. 862 comprise the league portion of the program, and 202 make up the hoops clinic. Overall, the program compared to last year is down by 39 participants overall. We actually included a chart, if you wanted to take a look at that, in the activities report to show that comparison to last year's program in 2011. The Griffin Volleyball Program is now closed at 40 participants. We added an additional coach and a volunteer to help us accommodate the increased participation numbers. We have the Holiday Lights Contest winner that's going to be announced on Friday, January 20th. We had, unfortunately, only 2 submissions, but we did select one candidate who's going to receive a gift certificate to 333 Belrose Restaurant in the amount of $50, so we want to thank them for their generous contribution of that gift certificate. The winner is also going to be announced at the Monday, January 23rd Board of Commissioners meeting. Thanks to a commitment, once again, from TD Bank for a monetary sponsorship in the amount of $4,000. We're busy planning the summer concert series already, believe it or not. We anticipate some enhancements to the concert series in 2012, such as the addition of a movie night and additional formulation of partnerships with local businesses and more activities taking place at each of the scheduled night's events. We're currently pursuing additional sources of revenue for the series, since ultimately, of course, the amount of funding that is secured will influence the outcome for how the event will be structured for the summer. Sponsorships received in 2011 exceeded $10,000 with the inclusion of both monetary and in-kind contributions to our department. We'd like to thank and recognize all those businesses and organizations who have sponsored events in cooperation with our department, along with the program directors who have also led in the process, namely Jim Canelio for his efforts with the fall, spring, and summer basketball league programs and their t-shirt sponsorships. He's really helped us out a lot. We generated actually about $2,000 to cover team sponsors for those 3 league programs, so we do want to thank Jim for all of his efforts there. Other special projects that we currently have going that are going to be taking part in developing in 2012 include a development of a Parks and Recreation Parks and Facilities booklet that'll provide historical information along with just general information about the township's parks and facilities. We're also endeavoring online registration as an opportunity for recreation programming and events. A scholarship program policy and application packet is also being developed, an advertising policy and plan, a social media policy, and we're also taking steps towards putting together a comprehensive marketing plan for the department so that we can further get information out into the hands of the folks in the community. In addition to programming, usage at Radnor Activity Center at Sulpizio Gymnasium is also being coordinated. 7 rentals took place in December for activities such as basketball, individual basketball rentals, futsal, soccer, and birthday parties. We also have continued to schedule the facility for our department's seasonal usage for youth basketball, along with the Radnor Middle School's basketball usage after school. The Willows Mansion hosted 15 events in December, and 5 are scheduled for January. We continue to try to rent the facility as much as possible, and of course utilize it for our department's programs and various special events and functions. On the Monday night, January 9th Board of Commissioners meeting, there was a resolution that was passed that authorized the Radnor Conservancy and the Community Garden Association to operate the Skunk Hollow Farm for the 2012 season, which was approved. And Sarah Pilling is here tonight. Later on, she's going to give us an update on that project and how that's going to work. The township received notification of receipt of a grant from DCNR for $35,000 for updating the open space plan. It's exciting news for the township as everybody's excited to get that project moving ahead. That concludes my report for December. For continued information, check the website at radnor.com. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions on Tammy's report? It looks like December was certainly a busy month with, even with the holidays. With that, John, you ready to go? Why don't we go down to new business and talk about John Fisher's here to talk about presentation on Birdtown.
Good evening. I'm John Fisher, president of the Radnor Conservancy. The Conservancy has been considering whether Radnor should adopt a Birdtown program, which is operated by Audubon, Pennsylvania for well over a year now. When we first approached the township about this program, they suggested that as a first step we should go to the EAC and the Parks Board to see whether those two bodies would support the program. We went to the EAC at its November-December meeting, and they voted unanimously to support the program. And we are now in step 2 of this project. We have come before the Parks Board. I want to make a short introduction and then turn the microphone over to Phil Wallace. I think many of you know Phil. Phil's a Radnor resident, an Audubon vice president, and someone who's very familiar with how this program has operated in the other townships that have adopted Birdtown programs at this point. Birdtown is a program which operates on a township-wide basis. There are approximately 30 townships that are now enrolled in a Birdtown program. Birdtown is a holistic approach as to how you can improve the quality of the environment in your township. The program is aimed at the township itself, which is why the Park and Rec Board and the EAC are involved, individual homeowners, institutions, businesses, with the goal of helping all of these stakeholders understand how we can improve the quality of the environment within the township. Birdtown operates a variety of programs which are really customized for each township, as each township defines how it wants to achieve the overall goal of increasing and improving the quality of the environment within the township. As Phil will explain, there are about 30 townships that are now in this program, and each township has adopted its own set of programs and goals. Why focus on birds other than the fact that this is an Audubon-sponsored program? Birds are an indicator of the health of your environment. Simply stated, native plants attract insects which are native to this area, and those insects attract birds. On the other hand, invasives do not attract native insects because the native insects are not used to the invasive plants. They didn't grow up with them, so they are not attractive by invasives, and therefore invasives do not attract birds. Frankly, it's a lot more interesting and a lot, I think, easier to follow the health of the birds in your community than to try to follow the insects. But the insects are critical to the health of your environment. At this point, I'd like to turn over the microphone to Phil, who can really give you an idea as to some of the programs that we might institute in Radnor. And as I said, the programs that we adopt in Radnor may be very different from what Lower Moreland has done or what Willistown has done. We need to fashion programs that really work and meet the strengths of what we have here in Radnor. Phil, you're on.
Thank you, John. I made 8 copies here. John, maybe you could help me out, and maybe there's a little sharing that goes on. I apologize. And if anybody's a bug person, I apologize. We're into bugs, but birds like bugs, and they're important to it. John actually was right on target in terms of native plants, property owners, landowners, and really using our web of life, if you really, to engage the homeowner. Yes, this is about the township, but really this is about engaging the citizenry of Radnor in being environmental stewards, which is, I know, your predisposition. You wouldn't be on the Parks and Rec Board if you didn't believe that. The trick and I've been running Audubon for about 3 years now, is how do you get people to really do that and not just sit at home? How do you get them engaged in their own property? And I have to admit, I'm not one of those upset big ear birders that goes out and checks my bird list every Saturday morning, okay? I will admit, I run the largest bird organization in the world, but I don't do that. Those who do get obsessed with this program, but there are not that many of us who are obsessed like that. Okay, so I'm admitting the underbelly of the problem here. But what I've learned over the last 3 years is that there really truly is a bird in everyone's life. If every one of you thought back to your childhood, you would actually come up with quite a memory about a bird. I don't care if it's on the seashore, whether it's in your backyard, a little chickadee that might have rested on your finger, or drawings that you did as a child. There is a bird in everybody's past. And I'm playing off that. I'm playing off that to engage people in what I believe in, which is that we all should be better environmental stewards. Birdtown is a way to do that. Now, as John said, we're in 32 different townships right now in very different ways. If you go up to Lower Frederick, they have gotten completely engaged in the fun of conservation. We help them run a bird festival. We pay for that. This is our cost. There are dollars involved in this, very minor. I'm not going to go there until you ask me questions on that. But they really like the fun of birding. And we ran a huge bird festival there over the course of a day that had chalk drawing, it had live birds, it had music, it had art. It didn't have go check your bird and check off your bird list. It had those aspects of the environment that make it fun. Why did we do that with them? Their goal is to try and get 10% of their citizenry signed up for our Audubon at Home program, which is within Birdtown, which would be, Joe, you saying, how do I make my backyard a little more bird friendly? Why? Because my kids might be interested, but frankly, I would like to have more wildlife actually in my backyard. That is a good thing. I enjoy that. It's beautiful. How do I do that?
You need to use the mic.
Oh, sorry.
That's
So we would actually sign you up. You would get a little sign. You could put it in your backyard if you'd like, but we would come out and assess your property. And we would help you think through what aspects would you want to do in your backyard. There's actually a budget there. You go on our website and you click off, I like purple, yellow, and red, and I want it flowering in the spring and the fall. I'm not around in the summer. Whatever you say. That comes up with somewhat of a pro forma in terms of budget, but also a layout of what your property might be best suited for. Okay? That's of real interest to property owners. They want to make their property. Now, from a township perspective, what we are interested in promoting is savings, cost savings. You all just received a great grant from DCNR. Yes, fantastic. I'm thrilled for Township as a resident. Stormwater is usually a huge issue with any township, and we try and help the township save on monies. Why and how? Through better planting. If you were to plant the native plants that John's talking about, yes, you would bring more insects, therefore more birds, and it would skyrocket in terms of the wildlife that would be on your property. But you also would be setting down a root system that would be advantageous to groundwater, as opposed to a lawn, just a straight lawn. That is of benefit to the township in terms of your MS4, in terms of your groundwater recharge, and in terms of your stormwater runoff. So from an engineering perspective, this program has real benefits. From a beauty perspective, it has real benefits. From birds, of course, we wouldn't be doing it if it didn't. It has real benefits. So we packaged that all together over the past year, wrote a business plan. I went to Wharton Business School, so I'm all about business. Wrote a business plan, thought about the different markets we could approach. And I really would like to see 2,571 townships in Pennsylvania all be bird towns. That may be a little aggressive, but we're on a roll. We are up to 32. Being a Radnor resident, I would love to see my hometown also do that. That's my bias. But I think it has real benefits for trying to achieve better environmental stewards, help them learn how to do that in their own backyard, at their schools, in their townships and have fun doing it. So that's what it, now, we have, as John said, a whole variety of things. And in the packet I passed out, you'll see some of them. There are, here in Radnor, there are demonstration projects that have already been done at each of the schools. There are a series of management techniques that different townships have instituted within their parks and recreation assets. For example, instead of mowing their properties right down to the streams, they will create those riparian corridors that I know you're already familiar with. How do you better manage that for birds? And we help townships do that. Schools tend to have very large parcels of lands, and they indeed want to try and learn those best management practices to do that. And then lastly, there are programs like the Bird Festival that we did up at Green Lane Park with Lower Frederick Township or with Upper Moreland. That is the fun side. So there are three categories that we tend to work with. Again, management techniques with those who are managing the assets, the parks departments. How do they do a better job on that? And there are many training programs that are provided. Number two are demonstration projects. Like over at Ithan, there's a very small bird habitat area, or at Radnor Elementary, there's actually a natural areas over there. We helped the township design that. And then third are actual programs that tend to be on the fun side. Of course, our goal is to have everyone actually be an Audubon at Home member, if you will, and do it in your own backyard. Have fun about it, tell people about it, with the goal of no less than 10% of the township being signed up, hopefully 100%. What have I forgotten? Okay. Questions?
Well, thank you. Anybody have any questions? John, what exactly is it that you're looking for us? I mean, I don't know whether, is this more of a backyard program, or is this more of you have a designated park in mind that you're looking to set something up?
Oh, no, we haven't reached that stage yet.
Okay.
I mean, this is really, I think what we need from the Parks Board is a resolution addressed to the commissioners supporting establishing this program. And once we establish the program, then we have to really think about the parameters of the program and what we really want to do in Radnor. I mean, for example, one of the ideas that Phil and I talked about is the Conservancy now is helping the township, along with Chanticleer, in what we call the Big Tree Program, which is planting trees along Lancaster Avenue, and we're going to start along Conestoga Road and trying to replace some of our big trees that have died out. That could be perhaps involved in this program. This could become kind of an umbrella program to really start to establish a number of various environmental programs in the township.
What do you foresee as potential costs potentially to the township, if any at all?
Well, there's an initial fee of $600 or $800 or whatever, and I haven't talked to anybody about how we're going to pay for that, but that's the initial charge. And then whatever, I mean, the Conservancy certainly is going to be a partner in all of this. I think Eastern University is interested in perhaps doing something on their campus. What we need to do, once we get the green light to start to think about getting this program started, is to reach out for partners to bring in. And based on the partners that you bring in, that may, to a large extent, determine the kind of programs that you adopt.
I mean, to me, from an environmental standpoint, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. I just, assuming that there's, the costs are covered and there's no, given the landscape that we're in this township and so forth, I think that obviously there's a lot of folks out there that are certainly interested and willing to jump on board, and I think it's, got a great...
Well, we're going to have to rely to a large extent on volunteer help, and frankly, one of our major needs is to find a person who I call Big Bird, somebody to really run the program.
Do you want to ask that with
No, that's what in my reading in the
Sounds like John
distributions.
Fisher.
John Fisher, Big Bird.
Should you be asking that with a yellow sweater on? I mean, that's not really the time to ask that question.
I think
John Fisher has enough to do right now.
the financial implications are minimal. I think at most it's like $600 for banners and so on and so forth. I guess one of the concerns I would have again, is that volunteerism and soliciting someone to kind of spearhead it. Because if you don't have that driving force, it's going to just fall by the wayside as another good idea, but you need someone. Do you have a feel that, that after we get the go-ahead for this, that either someone will perk up from?
Well, I certainly hope so, because if we don't find somebody to really kind of run the program, then we're not going to get off the ground. But we need to get past this first step, which is to say, all right, Radnor Township is behind at least exploring the possibility of doing this program, because it's done on a township-wide basis. So if the township doesn't buy in, then there really isn't a program.
What would the township involvement be after the initial sort of jump-off step?
Well, it depends, Andy. I mean, one of the ideas is you might want to start some kind of a program in one of your parks. Maybe you want to start to, pick an area in a park where you start to plant native plants and really encourage people to, keep track of the birds that are attracted to that. Maybe that's a project for, for school kids. Do something in the schools. Again, as Phil mentioned, we do have pilot projects at each of the elementary schools, but to work off of that.
So basically, it sounds like after this initial kickoff, like any other sort of project that would involve the township, that would then have to go in front of the requisite township board.
Oh, sure.
Or
I mean,
the
if we want to do
commissioners.
something in one of the, I think Creek Park, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a natural park, and I know there are people now that are looking at that as, possibly developing trails, cleaning up the park, that kind of thing. That would, involve probably coming back to the Parks Board for your blessing and hopefully your support.
And any analysis of cost and effect of
Exactly.
of that in particular project.
Exactly.
Anybody else have any other questions?
I do.
No, I'd like to make a motion, no.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead,
go ahead.
Brucey.
Just a quick one.
Sure.
What do you envision out of the things that Mr. Wallace has presented as being kind of ideal for Radnor? In other words, of some of the initiatives that he spoke about, the fun stuff, the homeowner stuff, the opportunities with schools or the parks. Do you have in mind at all sort of where you see this going?
Well, not yet, because again, it depends on who your partners are as to what kind of programs you develop. I certainly would like to see some kind of an outreach to homeowners, because that's fairly easy to enlist. We're not going to get everybody, obviously, but we can get a fair number of people that would say, yeah, let's start to look at what I can do to my yard by way of native plants instead of just trying to grow grass everywhere. Which is one of the worst things that you can grow from an environmental standpoint, but everybody wants to do it. Well, maybe we can start to change that mindset a little bit and get people to start thinking about how what they do in their yard affects the environment that they live in.
Okay, thank you.
Just to add to that, it strikes me that, having lived here for about 15 years, people love and care about their gardens a great deal, and we happen to have Waterloo Garden right next to us. I could imagine a combination of the tree program, the streets program, native plants, and some type of partnership with Waterloo might provide a wonderful way for people to directly get involved in their backyard. So I could see that native plant program really magnifying a great deal. The other is we've had great receptivity from the schools. And that's kind of gone dormant over the last year. That would be easy to snap in. The trick on that is getting long-term, I'll call it parental commitment. This is not something Audubon is going to staff. We're here to be an incredible resource, put the might of the organization behind it, our creative energy and our business acumen. But to your point, yes, we need volunteers here. And in the school system, where it sort of stopped was we needed a couple of great parents to go, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I don't think that will be hard to do. So I think those two areas are ripe opportunities.
Which goes back to the captain.
Which comes back to Big Bird.
Big Bird. Big Bird.
John, forgive me if I asked this before. I know you were before us in earlier times. EAC, have you spoken to any of the members of the EAC committee? Because I know, like, one aspect of it, the educational aspect of the program, I think 6 of the criteria Radnor already meets, okay, to qualify, so that's not a problem. But has anyone in EAC looked at this from their component of doing
Other
outreach
than,
and education? And
Yeah, other than passing a resolution supporting the program, I have not talked to any individuals as to whether they, for example, have ideas about somebody that would direct the program or how they would want to get involved. But that certainly would be something that we would need to do. I'd like to come back to you guys and talk about, ideas that we might implement in the parks. There's a lot that we can do, a lot of different directions that we can take, but it really depends on what the people in Radnor Township want to do.
Okay. Joe, did you have a motion?
I would just simply move that we resolve to support the initiative and ask the Board of Commissioners to consider act favorably on it. And I would ask representatives of Birdtown to come back to our group when they feel ready to give us more information about what we can do
Okay.
to move, I think, a very worthy and enjoyable initiative. So that's it. I so
Great.
move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. Yeah. Sarah, did you want to come up and make your presentation?
Before I begin, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. We bit off something. But I'm Sarah Pilling, and I live in Garrett Hill. And to give you a little bit of background, I have a degree in horticulture and landscape design, and I've been very involved in more urban community gardens since the mid-'70s and facilitated the building of community gardens in beautiful downtown Chester, Pennsylvania for 6 years, which was an experience. But anyhow, this piece of property, as you know, is next to the mulch pile at the Willows. And for 2 years, it was run as a CSA. And then through a series of circumstances, it ceased to exist. Weather didn't cooperate. Weather is always the loose cannon. So you really can't promise anything. You all know Katrina Ogilvy, and I wish she were here tonight, but she's in Vail without a drop of snow to go skiing. So I thought it would be a good idea to at least tell you what we're doing. So Katrina came to me this summer and said, I hear you know something about vegetable gardening. And I went, uh-huh. And she said, this is what we want to do. Well, a couple of years ago, when I was involved with the cottage, this is exactly what I wanted to do with this site. It was too small for a CSA, but it's perfect for community vegetable gardening. So we're operating at the moment under the umbrella of the Radnor Conservancy because 2 women could not get permission from the commissioners to do this, and we needed the benefit of their structure. Some fairy godparent comes along and wants to give us some seed money. They have a way to do it while we get up on our feet and find out what kind of critical mass we're going to develop and how this is going to fly. The goal eventually is to become a freestanding 501c3. So anyhow, that's the background. And at the moment, it's Katrina and myself, but it only happened at 10:30 on Monday night, and I've already got a list of about 15 people who've said, I want to be in the garden, I want to be in the garden. So I think we may have a problem in that we may have too many people for the plots. But at any rate, based on what Rose Tree Park does, where when I worked for Delaware County Cooperative Extension, I had a garden there. This is the site, and I colored it a little bit. It's broken up into 32 plots, each 19 feet by 19 feet. So those scrabbly diagonals are the plots, and the area is green. There are paths around all the gardens 3 feet wide, which allows you to back out, but it also gives a little bit of separation, and they'll run across the field. There is already a well there and a pump and a storage tank, but we will also, to illustrate good water conservation, this entire line will be lined with 55-gallon plastic drums linked together, so the water will go from the well to some to the storage tank to fill the barrels, and then using gravity with hoses, people will be able to water their gardens. The bottom area in here is already open and it's somewhat shady. We left an area for youth gardening if that ever develops. There is a sandbox. There are flowers beds in here. And somebody has started to plant dwarf apple trees. At least I hope they're apples, because peaches won't work and apricots will freeze. The side area where you can't really go is going to be common area for strawberries and brambles. There's already asparagus and grapes growing up this fence line. And of course, I hope eventually there will be bees. There's a gate here and a gate here and a great big gate here that I'm not quite sure why they did. And there's another gate down here. There are Delaware County or Cooperative Extension has a program for volunteers called Master Gardening, and Gail McCluskey is a master gardener, and she already came to me and said, we'll come and do our volunteer work there. They each have to put in, well, each are supposed to put in 20 hours a week. So I think it's not going to be a problem. You may not know that we started a small community garden in Garrett Hill last spring. And we ended up at the church. There was a little bit of neighbor pushback. Somehow they thought Garrett Hill was going to begin to look like North Philadelphia because there was a garden there, but that's all right. The church, the Radnor United Methodist Church, invited us, and they gave us a lovely, I mean that sincerely, quiet, protected, full sun plot in their graveyard. And because I'm getting a little old, and so are a lot of people. And it's what we used in Chester, because there we were squatting on abandoned properties that had had houses torn down with lead and asbestos and God knows what. We did raised beds, which is what they do in all the urban gardening program. I don't know whether you know about the history of urban gardenings. I mean, they go way back before the 70s. But in the 70s, the government gave substantial money for 23 cities in the United States, in the inner city, to build community vegetable gardens. And it's amazing how it can transform a neighborhood. And the building of community is really important. And that's what we found in Chester, was the people were really isolated, and they tentatively tiptoed into the garden, and they got to know their neighbors, not on a non-competitive basis. They became great friends, and they began to do wonderful things in their neighborhood. So it won't be mandated, but it's suggested because this is on a hillside, either just by piling up soil into mounds or building raised beds. We will suggest, and I will demonstrate. I'm going to have a demo garden. I have a friend who's going to come and garden with me. She's an excellent gardener, lives in St. David's. And we'll probably build raised beds. And the rain barrels will look like this. These are blue plastic rain barrels that we spray paint. Each car wash throws out about 5 a month. So we need to find some people with a truck who will just start trucking this stuff over. And they're hooked together, so when one fills up, they all fill up in a line, but then when they flow out, they all flow out. This garden was just unbelievably productive this summer. Most of the people didn't know each other. They became great friends. We used to gather there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, in a Methodist church, one does not have alcohol. So we would have iced tea and cheese and crackers, and we would just sit, and we've gotten to know each other, and it's quite amazing. Now, you may think that gardening is from May till the end of August, something like that. This is my bed at Thanksgiving. This is the same bed covered, just with hoops and plastic. Whoops, it's upside down. And I was over there today and picked more kale. This garden plot at Skunk Hollow could be a 10-month-a-year garden. When we gardened in Chester, and it was in the 90s, and I've got to find the formula. Each family that had a raised bed like this was saving about $500 in food, which of course was paying what they needed, but they were getting fresh, pesticide-free, absolutely fresh gardens. And at that time, well, until this year, there was no grocery store in Chester, Pennsylvania, so they had no access to fresh vegetables. It was a howling success. So this is what we intend to do. We're going to have an organizational meeting the 18th of February at 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the library. We are in the process of getting the word out. I taped a show with Sam Strike, which will be on tomorrow night on cable and will then go up on YouTube. And Pete Banyan called me on Tuesday and did an article, and it was in the mainline paper this week. And we will be distributing information to everybody that we can. And we hope it's going to work. There will be a small fee. It'll be $50 a year, which is directly in line with what they charge at Rose Tree Park. Then it's up to you for what the individual plot. What I'm hoping is that each family unit will be willing to garden with a second family unit this year, so we could get 64 families gardening in this garden. Some people may hold back, but I have a feeling that with the locavore movement and with the economy what it is, that a lot of people will come out. It's my goal that it will be ethnically and age diverse and income diverse, and I have this dream that some senior's going to come along and say, oh, I'd really like to do this, but I'm just too old to do this gardening, and we'll match them with a kid, and the kid will do the work, and the senior will teach them, because seniors have a great deal of value. I learned more things from my Chester friends than I could possibly believe, all little gardening tips. So this is it in a nutshell. I wanted you to know about it. We got the commissioner's support, and here we go. Any questions?
Great. Anybody have any questions for Sarah?
I do. I have a question and a comment. The comment is that anything that's associated with Katrina Ogilvy is a good idea, and I support it wholeheartedly. Sarah, my question is, what was it about the CSA that prohibited that effort from being successful, and why do you feel that this will be different?
I just jump in and ask CSA.
Community sustainable agriculture.
Thanks.
Where you buy into a share, which assures the farmer an income. He grows the vegetables, and you get a share of. Well, I participated in a CSA this year, and with the drought in July and the rain in August, it was not worth the $400 I paid. Now, that's not to say about the CSA at Skunk Hollow. The first year, they got the potato blight. So that was all tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, and peppers were gone. They didn't get them. And that's a big piece of your harvest. The second year was, this is the factor that you can't count on, is the weather. By the use of raised beds, however, the soil warms sooner in the spring. It stays warmer sooner in the fall. There's much better drainage. And you're only gardening, you don't garden in rows in beds like that. You garden in blocks. So you don't have a whole row of beans, and if you lose them, you've lost them. You'll have beans, and then you'll have lettuce, and then because everybody else is doing it, it's sort of interspersed and it confuses the bugs. I think the weather and the site, it can be wet, which is another reason to advocate growing across the hill and either mounding up the soil. My first garden that I ever did in the early 70s, I did it through mounds, and it was just incredible. I was freezing. I had to go out and buy a freezer and I had 3 kids and a husband. We couldn't eat it all. It's called the French intensive method, but I think
that's unusual, because usually the husband can usually put away most everything you have. Well, that's great, and I'm sure it'll be successful,
Well,
and I think
we're
that's-
going to give it our best shot.
Mike, do you mind if I just intervene and just make a comment? I was involved with the CSA both years, so the issue, I mean, there were weather issues and there were some blight issues, but the biggest reason that didn't get any bigger was because there's just not enough land to support the size and the demand of the people. I mean, both of the years that it existed, it was oversubscribed. So the demand was there. The plot was too small to provide the amount of vegetables that they needed to provide for all those families. So the model didn't work with that size of a plot. And some of the bottom half of the plot was unproductive because of the water, which nobody had counted on. So, hopefully someday in the future, if we have more land available for farming, a CSA model would be very successful. Not on this tiny little, this little parcel is too small to support that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, two questions. One, I'm over here. I'm sorry, Jim Schwartz.
Sorry.
The $50 a year, what does those funds go to?
Well, we have to pay the electric bill.
Okay.
This year, the Radnor Conservancy is covering the liability insurance, but that will be a fee that we will have to assume. When indeed it becomes a success, then we have the expenses of doing a 501c3, although I know a way that we can do it very inexpensively. We will need some equipment. We may need some decent garden carts if people don't step forward and give us some money. There will be some workshops that we'll need materials for. We'll need hoses. We'll need to tie the rain barrels together. It costs about $4.50 to tie 2 barrels together with the hoses and the clamps that you've got to put. We pretty much refined that this summer in Garrett Hill, so we know how to do it, but by the time you buy the parts. I also know that you need to charge something, because something that isn't paid for doesn't have the value than if you've put something in it. We may have a kitty to have a party. I don't know. It's the whole thing's up in the air right now because it just happened on Monday night. We really didn't make any steps except to get an EIN number before the meeting, because my old grandmother always said, it's not over till the fat lady sings. And I don't believe in taking too many steps till we know it's a probability.
And one other just suggestion, the meeting is at 1 o'clock?
1 o'clock on the 18th, which is a Saturday
Oh,
afternoon.
it's a Saturday, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Sarah. Okay. I see Mr. Mikolas is here. I'm assuming he's interested in touching on the athletic field usage. Why don't we go to that? Bob, you
want to have Tammy
Yeah.
maybe introduce this?
Sure. Why don't we do that first? I know that Bob had submitted some revisions and thoughts, comments, which the board really has not seen, so let's try and limit to that. But Tammy, why don't you touch on the concept and the policy that's currently in place?
Okay, the permitting of Radnor Township athletic fields policy, which also includes an application that goes along with this packet and information, is basically created to maximize and organize the way our department administers its fields and works with members of the community, community groups, institutions, members of the public to basically administer and organize all of the usage that's taken place and essentially build the schedules that we do in our office. The purpose of the document really was to put forth some clear procedures for how we would administer essentially the issuance of a permit or right to use a field. and then enable us to have documentation information that would be not only recorded by a scheduling mechanism to document usage based on each of the groups, but also have a clear filing system and paper trail, if you will, that goes back to all of the users that basically can enable us to have access to their information, their definitions in terms of use, any liability insurance forms, hold harmless, things like that that are submitted, which are all important pieces that we've collected in the past, but have not had any procedures put forth for doing so. So this would offer a little bit of a systematic approach in doing that. It also, as I mentioned, would offer some user guidelines for those who are actually out there on the fields, rules and regulations, if you will. The document sort of has morphed out of years of communications that have namely taken place between our park supervisor and our administrative assistant within our department. So I relied on them for a lot of prior documentation that we used to build the document and put it together. There's also an application for usage that would be contained in the packet, as I had mentioned, that would be completed essentially by the groups and submitted to us, along with any addendums, schedules that could, of course, be submitted either on paper or electronically that we would use to understand the usage and process it, and then, of course, turn around and confirm, perhaps, with the requested use. For the document's purpose, we would like to have something that we could start to utilize for spring of 2012. As everybody knows, it's our busiest field usage period, so it would be our department's desire to be able to put something in place. I realize that there's a lot of moving pieces right now with regards to the field usage, and namely fees that are being applied. And again, I can't stress enough that our department wants to be able to organize the way it's essentially working with these groups and working with individuals in the community to have, sort of a systematic process for how we put this together and understand it. So what I did was I took a lot of the documentation that we had over the years. I tried to morph it together into a policy, into the rules and the regulations that you see that you have before you. The application, it has been reviewed by John Rice, the Township Council. It is still under review. There were some comments that we had gotten back from the sports community representatives that we're continuing to take under consideration. And we basically want to work with everybody to try and put something out there that works for the township and works for the sports organizations and works for this board.
Tammy, is this something that upon approval then goes to the Board of Commissioners
Yes.
to ratify?
Yes.
So possibly this evening, what you're looking for is for us to approve it, to recognize that there'll be some additional inputs that, as you deem necessary, to move forward, and then at the point when you get through that iterative process, then you'll forward it to the Board of Commissioners.
If you would feel comfortable doing that, yes. With revisions, of course, because I don't feel that the document that we're looking at here tonight is in its final version.
But you feel it's a solid document nonetheless?
I do, but I do think it is going to come with some additional revision.
Okay.
So does that mean we'd be possibly looking to approve the concept of the policy or the parameters
Should we
of the
be
policy?
proving anything before we have a final document?
No, well,
We can always wait till February for a final document. For our department's purposes right now, I do want to encourage the sports community. As I mentioned, the busy spring season is upon us. I want them to, be working with us so we understand their schedules and can start looking at that. If the policy has to come out secondary to understanding some of that information, I'm comfortable with that, just knowing where we've come over the years.
we're more talking about the drafting of the policy itself, not necessarily, the process has already been approved by commissioners, right? As indicated by, or as presented by staff, correct?
The fee schedule?
Yeah.
The fee schedule has, the way it will be administered has not.
Okay.
And although there's not a lot of solid documentation in this for how that will be
So it's
carried
more-
out. The document itself, I think, is more about,
Implementation.
Yes.
And administration. John or Elaine, do you, either one of you want to touch on the policy itself that's adopted and approved by the commissioners?
Or the administration?
Well, I mean, the policy with regards to the fees and the fields was more, wasn't that put out by staff and approved by the commissioners, correct?
Just the fees.
The fees.
We're looking to see if you're looking to us to approve this and then give the administration, Tammy's group, the opportunity to work with the sports organizations and so forth to fine tune it and then get it to you, or you rather just have us have this as an opportunity to have an open dialogue about it and then go further and then come back to you at a later date?
I think we're at the stage where everyone really needs to scrutinize this and see and give your feedback. In my opinion, we're definitely going to have to do some tweaking, especially on the fee schedule side. So now is the time for you guys to take some time and scrutinize it, speak with your colleagues the people who this is actually affecting, and see if it comports with what they want to see happen, and then give the feedback before we have a final document to all talk about. Am I along the right lines there, Tammy?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things I was prepared to ask you folks to do just that is, I'm looking for recommendations from you folks on how we're moving forward now that we've stopped maintaining the school district fields. However, we still have all the sports that use both school district fields and township fields and facilities. And unless we figure out the way we're going to do that, it's going to be a disaster for the user community.
We actually talked about that last meeting.
Right, I wasn't here.
Right, with, how are we going to manage the time slots for overlapping sports groups and organizations that are using both township fields and school district fields, and how is that all going to, be worked out? And
Well, I'm looking to you folks to give us recommendations.
John, I understand. I'm looking like just at page 2 there. And Tammy, am I correct in saying up until this point, there really hasn't been a written protocol about how we go about allotting fields and who has first right of using a field, correct? Correct. When I look here just quickly, and again, you have to have time to digest it, and this brings up, John, what you're saying there. When I look at in the order, the fourth group that would have a priority to use a field, a township field, would be the Radnor Township Public Schools. They're coming in after nonprofit civic groups and so on, and that creates a problem. How do you know that we're going to balance what's happening with the schools?
Well, exactly. Like Joe and
well,
Mike may remember, many years ago, we had similar discussions, and it's sort of the break point was 5 p.m. In other words, after schools, anything to do with the schools up till about 5, they had first dibs. And then after that, the team sports would step up. It was never in writing, though. That was just...
I want to interject. First, I want to acknowledge that Chuck Madden is here this
Chuck.
evening, and we're delighted that Chuck is joining us, and I've known Chuck for a really, really, really long time, and I'm glad he's here. The way the policy is stated in Section 2 is not identifying priorities. It is rather identifying groups. I think that was in a former draft. I think that's been revised. It's saying that the permitted use of Radnor Township athletic fields are issued for the following classifications. It's not saying that we're issuing it in these orders.
Then we need words to that effect, in my opinion, because I read it that way when I reviewed this document.
Okay, well, I respectfully disagree. It doesn't read that way.
That might be, but...
And I don't feel that we need to be having a hard and fast rule about what the order is. And the primary reason that I feel that way is that we are moving toward the point of having maximized the utilization of the fields. So the reality will become, if you use a hard and fast scheme such as that, you're only going to get the first 2 or 3 groups to get fields at all. And I think what we need to do is to allow the Parks and Rec administration to balance the needs of the community, the sports teams, the schools, and work within the mechanism that they've worked very effectively for a long period of time to make that judgment. Not to say, here's the order that you can have, and if we have, pardon me, if we have a ultimate foosball team come up that needs 2 fields, and that falls within the category that you could have the first or second category dominate everything, and there'd be nothing left for anybody else. So I would caution against coming up with a hard and fast criteria for when somebody uses it and when somebody does not.
Well, and I think that part of the history has been, too, it's just been historical, essentially, on who's used it. I think it's been those newer inquiries and newer groups that have came up have been the ones that have
Which are popping
sort of
up.
gotten what's been the leftover space, if you will.
Which are popping up more and more.
Absolutely.
What was the name of the gentleman that was here that was doing all the scheduling?
Joe
Hammonds
Hammonds.
from Little League.
And he doesn't want to do it anymore. So, I mean, is there a way to replace him with 2 individuals, one from school and one from Parks and Rec? To have a coordinated, put a Google Doc up there that you can both share and...
It's certainly possible. I'm not sure of the official status of Joe Hammonds
Let's
either.
assume he's gone.
Joe's gone.
Yeah,
Let's assume he's gone, because he was pretty clear with that one. And you may know differently, but even if he's not gone, maybe we do need a plan B anyway. Or a 3-way where Joe is working with the township and the school board, or the school district, to create a unified document, because that's the only way I see it going forward. That, I mean, there's got to be representatives from both. Whether there's a maintenance agreement in place or whatever, that has nothing to do with it. It just has to do with who can use the fields and when.
Well, to that point, Chuck or Susan, any thoughts or discussions that have taken place that you're able to share with us and the board that you can maybe shed some light on what the thoughts are from the school district side and how we're potentially going to be able to intermingle all these different groups and organizations that want to use both the school district and the township and have been for many, many years so far?
Well, yes. I can share a little bit. I was just put on the facilities committee, and it was purposely done because of the fact that I'm also been put on the Park and Rec board, so that at least there's some continuity between this meeting and that meeting. I'm late tonight because I attend school and I didn't have an opportunity to request to the professors the first night of class, and I couldn't say I had to leave early, so that's why I'm late. But I think we're operating under a little bit of a fog, because we don't know all what has happened before, okay? My understanding is it was going very well. What we don't want to do is come in and screw it up, okay? We'll be the part of the Park and Rec board or speaking as a school board. So I think we need a little more clarity on the scheduling, who's going to do it, who did it in the past, okay? I didn't even know that. I shouldn't have to know that because, you know, we didn't have anything to do with it. It was all done by the other partner in this organization, which was Radnor, Park and Recreation. That's what you guys do, and you did a fantastic job with it. We're not trying to interject our piece into it to make it more difficult. There has been conversation about, at our high school, whether we would take over that responsibility of scheduling those fields, because we have an athletic director. There's been a request, a conversation about adding funding for an individual that possibly would do that, or whether that would come under within his office and somebody else would have those responsibilities. We don't even know that. It's all in a conversation stage right now. What we're looking towards doing is figure out where we want to go and how can we get there. It sounds pretty simple, but we don't even know where we're at right now. And that's the problem that I'm having. So we need to be kind of brought up to speed, and I think what we're trying to do is to sit down with some people in the Park and Rec and discuss, not the Park and Rec, you guys may want to be involved with this.
We definitely do.
Okay, but we're trying to get a conversation going with the users, okay? So in my mind, and I'm only speaking as a member here of this board,
Yep.
I believe it would be in the best interest that those conversations, if it is a three-way group that we're trying to put together here, that those conversations take place with all three of us in the same room, because I don't think we can afford to have conversations with the users and the township and the school board and the users, and he said this, she said that. You know, I want to avoid all that. Life should be as simple as we can make it. That said, we're trying to schedule a meeting with some of the users within the next 2 weeks. And I would petition the Facilities Committee to try to include you guys in it. It would be, my understanding, after 5 o'clock meeting, it would be in the evening, to discuss what we're going to do as far as the scheduling. Because we don't want to add extra money to ours if we can find some way to do it where it's much easier. And we do need to hear more from that.
Chuck, that users group that you describe, are they coming from the pool of people who have been using school district facilities?
I think it's
Just that?
I think it's community.
I
Like,
think
it sounds
no,
like
I think
from
it's
what you're
everybody.
saying, yeah.
We're trying to get a hold of the whole picture. I don't know whether it is or not. It may not be.
Yeah,
If it's not, I think I would.
I'm thinking of the township-owned facilities. If you have a unique user just to a township facility, you may not have that person invited to that stakeholders meeting.
We may not right now, but if we include the
That's right,
township in
yeah.
this piece, then they could invite them, because we might be able to utilize more of the fields if we put everything together.
Correct.
And someone comes and says, well, I need, Ultimate Frisbee would like a field, and then we have our whole master schedule, and it includes the township, and it includes the schools. And the other point was, someone also asked us if we could begin to pull in some of the other places that have fields that are in use. Because you guys use other people's fields besides the townships, you use other areas. So bring in as many people as we can who are already part of the organization that we have, because we don't even know all the players yet. And then once we have all the players in place, and we can somehow put either an announcement in the paper or something, if there's any other organizations that are not represented, we would like to hear from them. So we're trying to include everybody in it and then try to begin to hash it out.
Chuck, do you think it might be beneficial to meet with the township first, since they've been doing it and the school district's been doing it, instead of having all the stakeholders involved? Because I can see mass pandemonium.
Oh, you mean a brief meeting ahead of time to
Just
discuss
get it-
our strategy? Sure, we could do that.
Right,
I mean,
you
we're not
maybe
opposed to that.
might want to have Joe Hammonds involved as well, just because he's been doing all the. I'm just saying for experience purposes. I mean, just so you get an idea. I'm sure that Tammy can give you a lot of background on all this, as well as Joe, and if there's anyone else you think might be beneficial. But I think if you start with the user groups,
Well,
they're all going to be butting heads against each other anyway.
Well, they will eventually. I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with meeting with the township. I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with what the township has done. I like to meet with the people who may have problems and issues, and just speak up and tell us what they are, so that we don't fix everything and then somebody says you didn't do this or that.
Right.
But to meet first, sure, I would not have a problem with that.
What's happening right now? I mean, there are teams using fields right now at the high school and other places. Who's doing that?
Well, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the school district has said, we're going to let this go until our fiscal year ends, which is, July or June 30th. So we're not going to change anything as far as field uses go, as far as the scheduling and all that. We're trying to put in place what's going to continue after that, which needs to be scheduled pretty soon.
Yeah.
So, but no one is going to lose anything that's already been scheduled up until, my understanding is, at least July 1st.
But Tammy, nothing's scheduled for this spring yet, right?
No, nothing, and we haven't been scheduling any usage right now currently. I mean, we've been in
Any
a...
of our stuff, you mean? Any?
Not
Well, then I
presently.
think-
And there's
Well,
been a
we've
bit of a
got-
lull before
I mean, there's a
the big
soccer-
season, but I think we're waiting to understand what the school district is doing. And I thought through some of my conversations with Leo that the users were going directly to each of the schools now
Well,
regarding their usage requests.
That we'll have to clarify, because that would screw everything up if
Yeah, we
if we
definitely
begin
need
to
to know.
schedule before we bring our scheduler in. So that's something that I'll have to get clarified. I'm just stating what my opinion of what I've heard, and that is, we don't want to do anything and put anything in place. We don't want to change anything that's already scheduled until June 30th. Maybe they're talking about events that they're going to schedule on our property after that, but even so, if we're going to try to do it more of a universal piece, we may want to hold off on that.
Right, but I don't think anything's scheduled up until June 30th.
Well, it should be.
I don't, is it? I mean,
We haven't scheduled anything at this point for 2012.
You mean your Little League or anything like that's not scheduled?
We have some submissions of requests, but there's nothing that is formalized at this point. Bob, I'm sure, can speak probably in a little bit more detail. He, in the room, probably knows a lot.
Before
more.
Bob speaks, I'd like a point of order here. Our agenda item is for the discussion and evaluation of the township athletic field usage policy. And in the definition, it's maximize and organize the utilization of Radnor Township athletic fields. I don't think we really need or should broaden into what's the mechanism that we're going to use to effectively substitute for what has been the removal of the township and the school district agreement. I think it's too broad. I think we're better to discuss this policy and then to charge Tammy, which I thought we did last month, to recommend to the Board of Commissioners to say, hey, we're empowering you to go to the school district and say, we need to work out a mechanism. Because in a public group like this, we're not going to get there. It really needs to be,
You're right.
it really needs to be Tammy, it needs to be the folks over at the school district, and then, I think like Chuck and Pat and Jim have suggested, then bring in the school or the sports user groups. Because otherwise, we're just going to go around talking about potential mechanisms for how to communicate effectively, and I don't think that's what this agenda item was
No,
really
you're right.
intended
Well,
for.
but in order for you to maximize your use, in my opinion, it would be you're maximizing the use of the fields that the township may be using that now are our school district. So in order for you to, is yours just maximizing the use of
Radnor
your own?
Township
This just
athletic
refers to our
Not
fields.
Radnor School
Okay.
District fields.
But in order to maximize your fields, you should be able to use ours, which would help you to maximize.
Right.
That's my only opinion on it. If you're just going to try to maximize your own piece with your stuff,
Conceptually, I agree with you.
it could
To
be,
your point, but also to Mike's, it would seem that we need to try and get Mike Friel and Tammy together and talk about some issues. And
Right.
that probably needs to happen sooner than later.
yeah, I agree with you, Mike. But I think what came to the forefront tonight is everyone's waiting for everybody else to do something and nothing's happening.
Right.
And we're running out of time.
Well, didn't we say that last month?
We did. We
Didn't we
thought it
say,
Yep.
Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we say, we recommended that to the administration and to the Board of Commissioners that you guys communicate with the school district and come up with a mechanism during this interim period to when a new agreement is worked out, or if no agreement is worked out, then a new mechanism does. But we're only half the pie. I mean, Chuck and Susan can't speak for the school district, and they're probably not in a position to really talk through the mechanics of how field utilization.
Oh, no.
and
Totally.
scheduling
I
is
mean, that's
done.
absolutely
It's not
right.
our
It's not
expert.
our job.
We're not the
Leo-
right people in the room.
Right, but Leo has been receptive to discussion with me.
And I'm
I mean,
sure
we've
Leo's great.
we've actually had good discussion, but I think there's still uncertainty on his behalf because he's looking for direction just as I am on how to move forward.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think we can wait for direction to come. Unfortunately, it's really going to be that you, with Leo and the gentleman over at the high school, to
Mike
be the
Friel.
catalyst of, here's our solution, and then run it up to us, because we're not a complete communication mechanism here. We're not going to be able to get to a resolution on this issue.
I mean, I think it has to be assumed that there's not going to be any kind of agreement going forward, and the mechanism has to be a start from zero, and I think that's, and we'll hopefully work back from there. I mean,
And that's why we were moving forward and trying to administer what we have and we know our charge is headed into the spring. You know, hence the policy, hence the document, and trying to, you know, be responsible for township field usage.
I just think it would be nice if this board could then authorize you to contact Leo and say that the school board representative stated that up until June 30th, my understanding is that everything that was in place for June 30th, or anything that can be put in place that was before, is still good.
That's direction.
Okay.
And then at that point, we all would understand that, yeah, we'll go through the same process that we've used until June 30th, and then
That's a
continue
great
from there.
solution.
That would come with the assumption then that our department is still managing a degree of use at the school facilities.
Yeah, but again, it's my understanding that we're not looking to change, we're giving almost like a grace period. We're not, and again, we need clarification from the board. I'm not saying this is my understanding is we're saying up until June 30th, we want to continue to do what we were doing so we won't impact any of the users of those fields, whether they're township or school district. We would like to see it just continue to move forward as we're working on what we're going to then do with the scheduling in the future. That was my understanding, and I hope that's the way it is. And if
Well,
that's not the way it is,
yeah.
if that's not the way it is, then you need to come to, you don't need to call me so that I'd like to know what it is myself. So, and that could be the problem that we're having here. I'm hearing one thing, and if that's not exactly what you're hearing, then that's a problem for me, because as a school board, our direction was only positive impact on the programs that we already have in place. That's it. Until the 30th. And then at that point, it can change.
The way we've been proceeding is that as a result of the maintenance agreement being terminated as of December 31st, that our staff would be responsible for township fields only. So if that...
Scheduling, you mean,
for scheduling township fields only.
Oh, see, that's a problem, because...
I second that.
Yeah.
Well, you could schedule just the township fields, but then if we're not scheduling the other fields, then the users aren't going to get access to them. So we're creating a situation that is not what we're here to try to do.
Tammy, why, what are your thoughts on, or what's the board's thoughts on, since we seem to be kind of going around in circles, why don't we table this, charge you to get in touch with Leo, Mike Friel, let's try and come up with some clarification as to direction of what the school district personnel is envisioning or under the assumption or presumption of what is going to happen. Relay what the township's presumption is and try and come up with following up on this next month.
I could do that immediately. I'm eager to do that immediately.
What about
because
having
the
like a
season
joint
is
presentation?
pressing.
What's that?
A joint presentation maybe with Leo and, I mean, just so we have all the players in one room at least, that's a start.
Thoughts on,
I mean, it needs to be pushed, I think. I mean, I don't want to come back next month and say, okay, well, we had a conversation. I mean, it's got to be, we had a conversation, we've designated people, and we've started scheduling, because,
yeah,
I mean,
applications
lacrosse
are-
starts in 2 months,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Baseball starts in 2 months.
But I think both administrations need to get together.
Absolutely.
and-
Tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, we need some direction as to where they're going, where we're going, and figure out where we're going, you know, where this is all heading. Joe?
Which brings us back to the document.
Right, which is going to have more
So-
revisions.
You know, I mean, this is an administrative, internal protocol for scheduling, and I don't know what input you'd like from this group. Tammy, are there specific changes or something substantive that's changed from how we've done it in the past that we should consider, or is it just a more formal way of presenting it.
What I think is, I think we should, with uncertainties not only surrounding the process, but I think some uncertainties with the fee schedules as well, I think that it probably would be a good idea to maybe put this on hold and proceed with prior application process. So there is an application that's in there. I think our department should refine that, work with John Rice to make sure that the application has the correct verbiage in it with regards to liability and indemnification, and work within that document, which has been used in the past, but now being refined with his input, and utilize that as the tool to get the information that we need as of right now. And I think it's in the best interest right now, though, of the uncertainty to not proceed with the policy until we understand more. I'd rather put out a document that is all-inclusive of
Yep.
exactly where we are versus one that we may have to come back and take a look at again in July or August.
Make amendments and so forth.
I mean, one thing I would suggest, just because of the differencing of opinion just in the reading of Section 2 in terms of the user groups, you might just want to rephrase the first sentence to something along the lines of groups falling within the following classifications. So I'll have permitted use of Radnor Township athletic fields, just instead of just something along that, and then maybe put colons after each list, and maybe put the list in alphabetical order so it doesn't read so much as a pecking order. It's just more of a group, someone falling within that, just to clarify, conflict in interpretation.
Or you could just say in no particular order, this is not a priority list.
Yep.
Not that
can
I
do
want to
that.
get involved in school district business, done that many, many years ago, but Chuck, does the school district have a policy in place for usage of their facilities and fields?
Sure, yeah, we do.
Yeah, they'd be interested to see how that dovetails with how they approach certain things. Again, just from a standpoint of getting input and going from. The nice thing about policies, people love policies and procedures because it outlines a path and eliminates gray areas are, the two old terms that people never, I don't want to be arbitrary and capricious in the interpretation of my actions. And policies preclude that. If you have good policies in place, okay, you really minimizes the chances of being said that you're arbitrary or you're capricious in your actions or why you did that. So that's what I like to see in a policy. It's very hard to get there, but I remember last year in the springtime, we spent a few hours in discussions with people trying to use facilities and the kids saying that, hey, you're not treating me, or parents saying that, our group is not being treated fairly, and used. So it would be nice to have a policy. I'd love to see what the town school district has and say, hey, we can get a nice policy together here. God bless you. That's it.
Bless you.
God bless you. Just to add on to that, we also have classifications, and they're different from yours.
They are.
And I believe they are on a prioritized list as well.
And I'm sure they are. So,
Prioritized list.
yes, ours is. So those are things that maybe the two policy people, somebody told me this a long time ago. Somebody told me this a long time ago, and he was in the military. We need to look at this as a peace treaty, okay? This is how we need to look at this. The people who are the ones that have the authority to make peace, we'll just say, would be the school board and the Board of Commissioners. They need to agree that this has to get worked out, and this is what has to happen. We want to make sure that the community, the residents, are given a fair shake, everyone. We want to make sure that none of the users are precluded. We want to make sure of this, and the township commissioners, I'm sure, agree with this, and I'm sure that the school board agrees with this. But we haven't had that conversation. Once that conversation takes place, and we're in agreement that this is what has to happen, then it's sent to the people that actually do the work. And that's where Tammy and Leo come in. Once it's agreed upon that, yeah, this is what we want to happen, they make it happen. If we get bogged down in trying to make it happen through them, it doesn't work. We have a fantastic person in Leo. And now that I'm on this board, we have a fantastic person in Tammy. We need those two to make it happen. Once the two boards agree that it's going to go that way. I'm not a messenger at this point I haven't talked to my board about this, but believe me, I will, to make sure that the next time I come back, I have more facts. And Tammy, if you have any questions that you need answered from the school board, you can just send them to me, and I'll make sure that they're sent right to whoever should answer the questions for you. And if the questions come back and you don't understand, we'll make sure, or I'll make sure, and Susan also will make sure that things happen. That's about all we can do on this board for you.
I guess the question I have, my naivete again, I see two issues going on here. One has pretty much been resolved, okay, with maintenance of, and that's done, that's a done issue.
Right.
Okay. The township's going to handle their properties, the school district's going to handle their properties, and that's pretty much a done deal.
Right.
Now, the issue that still sits out here is that you have this vast number of resources that are jointly owned. Now, how are we going to share those resources for the benefit of the community? And there doesn't seem to be any procedure set up to even start the discussions with that right now.
That's where I'm at, too. That's what I'm saying. That's what we're trying to do.
I mean, just to clarify, I don't think it's jointly owned, but used, jointly used, yeah. I mean,
But if
Tammy-
if you refer to the turf fields, though, there could be an argument that there is joint
okay, all right,
ownership.
okay.
But the point is valid.
Yeah.
The point is valid.
Tammy,
It's ours and yours, and we're all trying to cross-use what has to get done.
And Tammy, is it fair to say that the instruction from the administration has been not to schedule any school district fields?
Yes.
Okay. And it sounds as if what Chuck is saying is that the school district is open to keeping the same process in place that has been in place till the end of the school year.
Till June 30th. That's my,
Okay.
And that's a surprising
Take on.
discovery to me, which is why I feel
Okay.
that the document
And an important
should
one.
be put on hold, because that's a piece that I was not aware of, and in my conversations with Leo, that would surprise me that that's the case.
well, he may not have been aware of it. This conversation, we had a meeting Tuesday,
Sure.
so she's not on the facilities committee, so this just came about, and that was the first meeting I was at, Tuesday. So we pushed some different things forward at that point, and maybe he
Mike.
wasn't aware of that.
Mike, this conversation is becoming circular.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I mean, is there any, I mean, what about having this joint presentation maybe with Leo here in the next meeting? I mean, is that a?
I don't agree, Andy. I think it's better to be a conversation between Tammy, Leo,
and Mike Friel.
and maybe Mike Friel, and if Chuck can touch base with someone on the board, and if Tammy and Bob Zinkowski want someone from here, you know, maybe Jim could participate on our side and meet that way. But I think it's let's get on the same page discussion before we can pick up this issue again.
We all in agreement to table this till next month and have Tammy get in touch with the administration?
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
So, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public participation, Bob?
Obviously, I know a lot about the scheduling and the field usage. The way, at least from my point of view and my colleagues in the different sports programs for the youth programs, we're faced with the termination of the long-term agreement, which means that the maintenance part of it has been taken care of in terms of it's no longer responsibility of the township, and it's now the responsibility of the schools, now separately contracting for the maintenance requirements. What was not dealt with at all was the usage. And on behalf of the Radnor Athletic Association and the various organizations, I wrote a letter to both boards and to this board, suggesting that a new agreement be put together that's specifically on usage and rules and regulations, or at least policies around community usage. We don't have that. There was a couple attempts to try to get conversations started. We hit the holidays, and it just didn't happen. In addition to elections and people changing positions and things like that. So we're now into January. All the reorgs have been done, and everybody's in their new position now. So really, conversation up to this point couldn't have been effective because of the changes. The various sports organizations are all waiting to figure out what they're going to do for the spring, because we need to get our permit applications in so that we know we have places, because we're starting to collect the registrations already. It's obvious what the complications are. We probably can get through the spring with a modicum of similarity to what was done before, in a sort of a limbo of having no agreement. I think it's feasible to try to do that, but the mechanism now is, without anything that's been approved at the highest up through the levels, we have to apply separately to the township, and we have to separately to the school district, and the school district requires us, through their existing policy, to apply to each school. It's very, very cumbersome, because the applications require time of usage, who's going to be there. I mean, they have very, very detailed requirements, as if it's a single user for a single event. Even this draft has that flavor to it, is that it's under the presumption that you're going to go there for one event and have one game or one event. So it's not a major change, but it's something that needs to be, better attributed to how this is done. We have many leagues, including adult leagues, that use both township and school district facilities. Some of them fall into different categories, and some of them have sort of nuances or exceptions even within those categories. So there was at least an attempt to try to get a thorough understanding of who all these groups are and who they are and what they use and what they don't use and that type of thing. And we could probably have I'll call it a working session, where all those details are put together. But the bottom line is, we're going into a spring season, and we're going to have to do separate applications and meet the separate requirements, because we have nothing else. The concern was, we have no idea what it's going to cost us to use the school. We haven't had any direct conversations yet, but we've heard, at least from some representatives of the school district, that the charge would be comparable to what we were charged before, which was nothing. So, but other groups were charged.
Good.
Adult groups were charged, but adult groups weren't charged by the school district. They were charged by the township. So it's still a limbo for the various groups, the ones that were charged, and what are they going to be charged, and how are they going to go through the process. Most of the elements, like insurance and things like that, I think they're all manageable, but you don't go to one place anymore. You got to go to multiple places to get everything done. It's not good on I'm saying, and I'm emphasizing, in the short term it could be managed, but in the long term it's not good, because it then creates a mechanism where one group who gets new leadership or a new program, then they try to get in, and they're not cooperating with everybody else because they know somebody at the school or they know somebody at the township, and they can get their program in and get their time, and then everybody else has to work around their time. And it's not a sharing arrangement, it's more of a who got their foot in the door first.
Is it fair to let Tammy, Leo, and Mike Friel get together and see what direction or where we're going?
I don't know. I think the problem is they don't have a direction, a overall direction or an overall policy, other than do what you need to do for your facilities. That's what I'm reading into the communications is, you do what you need to do for you, you need to do what you do for you, and then the public who uses both doesn't have any common.
Which reverts back to what Chuck said, that it's a school board and commissioners.
Right, there's no usage agreement, right? You have to go through that two separate chains to get your, now, it's not, this situation exists in other towns, obviously. They don't have joint agreements. They never had
I
joint
don't
agreements.
remember the maintenance agreement speaking a lot, if at all, to the scheduling of fields and the mechanisms associated with it.
It doesn't.
So
It's been practiced, and the modicum
this
for
may
the
be a moot
practice.
point.
Well, that's exactly my point. My point is that we're saying, well, the maintenance agreement fell apart, therefore we can't schedule fields anymore. And
We don't have the underlying,
Excuse me, Mike, it really was more than a fields agreement, a fields maintenance agreement. So that
right.
subsumed under that was scheduling, and for example, when we looked at the cost, we included staff time for scheduling.
Okay.
So
There was also the use of facilities like the Willows and Fenimore and places like that as well, so I think that was part of that as well.
But there wasn't a component that spoke to the mechanism of scheduling fields.
no.
And what we're saying is, oh, we no longer have the maintenance agreement, the care of the facilities, therefore, we no longer have the ability to schedule, whereas
I don't know
Chuck,
what the two have to
No, no.
do with each other.
Chuck is saying very
they
well.
have a
hey,
lot to
why-
do with each other in that by separating, with that fields agreement being separating, as a policy matter, does our board particularly want to expend taxpayer money to do the scheduling of school district facilities?
That
That's
sounds
it.
very narrow.
It may be, but that's what it is.
Well, would the.
And that's why I asked you guys earlier tonight. See, the boards, the school board and the Board of Commissioners are policy boards, right? The staffs do the things. And we look to the advisory boards who advise the commissioners and the school district to make recommendations regarding policies. So I'm looking for you guys to make a recommendation to me and the commissioners as to how we should move forward on this issue of scheduling.
Question?
Yeah.
So there are two separate issues as I see it. One is scheduling policy, another is availability. Agreed?
Right.
So in the, availability of facilities that were at one time one and now they may not be. So from a pure scheduling standpoint, this document, the draft that Tammy gave us, yes? I mean, is this a gross departure from the way you've done things in the past?
No.
It's more specific, it's more formal, it's better verbalized, but, I mean, whatever you'd been doing in the past for scheduling had worked, more or less, yes?
Well, with regards to this document, other than, including the schools in that is the gross difference, in my opinion.
I mean, roughly, it's.
But
there's
no one
half-
knows-
Roughly, it's about half. You can at least think about it. It's half of the facilities that they were dealing with before. So the groups that came to the township to say, we got 28 teams, we got 150 teams, whatever it is.
But Bob, if we lived near
we
the
got about half-
Mississippi and
they
we
only
had
can
a
offer
flood
them
and we
half of the
lost half our
facilities.
fields, you still have to have a policy to schedule what's left.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to advise right now. We're being asked to look at a document for scheduling and say, is this a good, reasonable one? And, no one knows more about scheduling than you do. I mean, I've been here a long time, right? Hands-on person, right? Boots on the ground scheduling. So if you've been over that document in detail, I'm sure.
Right.
If you see glaring problems with that, you know better than anybody sitting here what they might be. If you would share them, I think that would be a tremendous help to anyone who's trying to draft such a document.
Right.
That seems logical.
What the document does, and I'd give comments to Tammy in my, first detailed read-through, it deals with permitting. It deals with the ability for a group to use a field. It doesn't really deal with the mechanics of whether I get this time or that time, or whether my time gets bumped, or whether I have to, get a phone call and they tell me I'm not going to use it, or whether I have to pay. It doesn't deal with any of that. It just has to deal with permitting.
Not mechanical, it's a policy.
Right. But it has to
So
do
we're
with.
trying to
but-
set
but it-
policy
But
for scheduling.
it's regulations for use, and it's the permitting requirements. You have to have insurance, you have to have this, you have to have that, you got to fill out a form. It's permitting.
Right, so if you have problems with the policies, then that's what would be helpful for Tammy to know.
Right.
And if there are different, if there are policy changes from many years, status quo.
Right.
So our board tonight is looking at this. Does anybody have a recommendation for how to advise the township, Tammy's department on how to move forward creating policy.
Right.
Just a question, you know, when I look at some of the verbiage under the policy that was generated, general information, now you have two separate entities. You have school district facilities and you have township facilities. If these policies are not in concert, okay, what then happens to someone who wants to interpret something? All permitted users must proactively evaluate excessive wear. Does that fall on Tammy or the Parks and Rec Department to speak for school district properties?
No.
Or does that fall on the school? Who has been doing something like that, implementing the regulations for, because I assume we looked at all of the resources as one in the
No.
past. No?
In the past.
In the past,
But not
in the
now.
past, not now.
Not for this document.
Well, but you're trying to draw two entities together, having two separate policies, and I just don't want to belabor the point. I see that being very difficult.
For clarification, Tammy, were you helping or assisting in the scheduling of the school district fields?
Prior years, upon coming into the role of interim director, no.
Well, no, I meant
No,
just,
What was I'm not sure what your question is, because she was asking what her role was.
no, not, I'm
My
not
personal role?
specific. I'm
Okay.
talking about the department's role scheduling township fields and school district fields, or strictly school district?
For
Or-
community use, yes. Not for school use, but for
For
community.
Community use.
Park and Rec was handling both school district and township
Yes.
fields.
What would happen? Would you get a block allocation of time from the district saying, here, this is over to you, put this in your mix?
Right, and that was where really Joe Hammonds had
Right,
came
and
into
to-
play, of course, for
To me,
a large part of that busiest season,
to
was
me, I
to
think-
manage that.
To me, I think what needs to happen first is Tammy, Leo, and Mike Friel need to get together to figure out which direction we're heading, and whether or not the school district and the township fields are going to be scheduled in the same way they have been, which, if you listen to what Chuck is insinuating, that's the case.
Yeah.
Up until June, which gets us through,
Yeah.
which may potentially mean tabling the usage policy until it coincides with the school district.
Our concern is that,
Because, as you say, there's no usage policy.
right, the concern is that the job of the township is to serve the community. And to make these facilities available to the community. The school district's primary job is to educate the children in the school district. And they've been gracious over the years in allowing those facilities, because the public pays for them, to allow community use of those facilities. But their primary job is to worry about what sports get scheduled, what after-school activities get done, and serve that need. So we're concerned, as the non-school users, that the administrators, because that's their job, are going to sort of say, well, if we don't have to, we don't want to. If we don't need them there, or if there's a problem with the field, we'll just shut it down, and the community will just have to go find someplace else. So that's our concern, is that before it was all shared facilities, and the school basically dealt with when they were going to use it and made everything else available. And now it's not so clear, and when we apply for any application to any field for any time slot, they could say no. I mean, there's no.
There's no chance that the Radnor Township School District is going to deny the use of available fields
They already have.
to the community.
They already have.
I-
They already have.
Tell me about that, please, Bob.
It has to do with concerns about conflicts with parking lots and other things.
And is this for the spring?
It was in the spring and the fall for the last 3 years.
So even
It's
before
not-
the
it's
maintenance
not
agreement?
like-
So it's not
It's
related to the maintenance agreement?
It's not related to the maintenance
Right,
agreement. It's related to how the school's being used, how the facilities are being used, and what their priorities are. So we've already experienced that the school's priorities said you can't be on the field before 10 o'clock in the morning,
That seems to me a separate issue.
And
and-
it's an
I
issue
mean, that's the
related.
prerogative of the
Right,
school
it's
district.
prerogative, right, it's prerogative of the school, but we know that the behavior is if anything else comes up, there's no overlay of no agreement whatsoever. So if someone, an administrator in a school says, I don't like what happened last year, we're just not going to make it available, then we have to appeal to the board and we have to go through a whole bunch of process to get that back opened up again.
Okay.
Because there's no common policy agreement. Now, there is a school district policy for approved permitting use, but it's subject to the principal or their directive at the school.
As it should be.
And they could just say no. There's no appeal, there's no other process. So the concern from the sports groups is that with a process that's been broken apart, and we're going to have to make these different applications, that we can probably get through it with the current people involved through this spring. And long term, it's going to be very difficult for it to stick together. And my concern is that if the sports groups have been involved, not involved, involved, and not involved because it wasn't in our purview to do other than to make comment. As far as this particular draft agreement, the kind of concerns I have about it are specific to the agreement. They're not not involving the school district.
Tammy has them, and
Tammy has
Yes.
them. I think that in general, there's a lot here on what I would call guidelines on usage, and it comes across as almost as if you don't do this, you're going to be kicked off the field. So it's a little too harsh because a lot of this was put together because the people that were maintaining the field said, look what they did last week. We don't want them to do that anymore. So then it sort of wrote it up and became into something, and now it's carried over onto this. So rather than a set of guidelines, it looks like there's a set of rules, and the set of rules are going to be enforced.
let's let Tammy take a look at your enhancements, revisions, suggestions, rework this document, which we've tabled.
Right.
Let's let Tammy, Leo, and Mike Friel get together. In the age of electronics, we can certainly get information out with regards to what transpires with that meeting to the sports groups, and let's go from there.
Okay. The one concern I have is that we need some understanding of, and maybe it's a separate conversation about, there's sort of details in here that you'll be able to see about, you know, if there's one team and then there's another team, and then if we have an event and there's two teams playing together, and during the event there's a time when those two teams on the field are not both from Radnor. This says you have to go get a separate permit for that.
Again,
It
let's
doesn't really make
let
much
Tammy
sense.
go through and go through all your recommendations and suggestions and rework and massage and so forth, and we'll
Okay.
we'll have we're gonna have multiple drafts of this thing. So
The other concern is about the fee. We don't know exactly how it's going to apply to us. If we take all our T-bowlers and put them all at elementary schools, then do we have to pay for the T-bowlers if they're not using? I mean, it just becomes
assuming
a practical
there's
nightmare.
not a fee from the school district, which there may be, and let's see where that goes.
Right. I'm just saying, when we put an application
you.
in,
I
it's like,
understand.
well, we don't really know. Do we
Yep.
take 50% because
Yep.
we're going to use only 50% of the fields and say,
That's going to be
We wanna
an
pay 50% of the
administrative
fee?
challenge that the school district and the township are going to have to
Hey, Bob.
work through.
Bob, yeah, I would appreciate it if you could articulate the things you just mentioned, you know, if you see some room for improvement in this document, how it could be better, if you would help us by giving that to staff.
yeah, I couldn't get to it till
No, I mean,
today, but it's in
at your leisure, but that would be very helpful.
Tammy has
to have
that.
your
Bob
input
has
on-
forwarded
on-
that. There's some very valuable information in there that I could forward out to the board as well and
Yeah.
share that.
It came through late, and rather than cloud Tammy's taking a look at that.
Right. The other thing that I wanted on a new topic, not on this agreement, I mean, not on this policy, but I'd like to bring it up officially and find out what the best way is to come here, to go to the township manager, to go to the board. The different programs have invested a lot of money into the fields and into the facilities, and we'd like to have some consideration in the fee we paid for the money we invest in the fields. So we just replaced both infields at Enki with a new sod. It was all completely taken down, taken out, new sod was put in. It's never been done for the last 20, 25 years that it was resodded. Obviously, it benefits Little League a lot, but it also is available during the day. It's a public field. So we invested, I don't know, I think it was on the order of $20,000 in those improvements and those repairs. And now we're looking to pay another fee on top of it. So we brought this up before when the discussion was about fees. It was said, well, we'll get to that, come back to us. So I'm coming back and saying, what's the best way to do this in the terms of trying to get some consideration for when we invest money in the facilities.
Bob, is part of your concern with that, I think that's a legitimate argument or a legitimate point, is part of your concern with that if you take $20,000 and you pay it in fees, it goes to the township? If you take $20,000 and you put it in sod, you know where it goes?
There's a couple elements. That's certainly one. The other is that we'll have less financial resources to do those kinds of things. And it just, less of it will get done. Longer times between doing those kinds of things. And the motivation of the boards to actually say, well, why don't we put another sprinkler system in here, or why don't we do something else to help maintain the fields? Say, well, we're paying this money. Why should we put more money into it? So it's a combination. It's not. I wouldn't say it's just one thought. It's a combination of thoughts.
You might agree, though, that enhancements are different than maintenance.
Right. Well, I mean, it has to have a process put in place to say, well, if you want to put in a brand new scoreboard, nobody else is going to use that scoreboard except your program, unless you let them, right? Unless unless it becomes a donation, in which case the township can let anybody use it. So it's a different situation.
Joe, I think part of Bob's point is that money that's collected from the sports teams, I don't believe, Elaine, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that those monies are earmarked to go into park and rec facilities.
No.
It goes into the general fund.
Yeah.
Can I just interject here on that issue? You know, the fee schedule was voted upon, but it's not set in stone and forever unchangeable. And as we move forward and we start to realize and recognize that, you know, this maybe isn't fair, you can't, if this team only uses the field once a year and this team's using it every day, they shouldn't be paying the same fee. It would be really helpful to hear from the sports teams or from this board an alternative fee structure based on percentage use, based on with perhaps set-offs for monies donated. Another system could be possible, and all it takes is a presentation and 4 votes, and we can change the fee schedule. So, comments like this are really helpful. And coming up with an alternative scheme that would be palatable to the community and to the township, that's the key, that's the ticket. Then we bring it to the board and we change the fee schedule. So, we haven't thought through every idiosyncrasy of the fee schedule as it is right now, but right now it's pretty broad and it's pretty it's not going to be fair when it's administered. So my request is that we start to think through a strategy and a scheme that is fair. And I don't know what that is. There are probably examples out there in Parks and Rec land of other townships who have a fee schedule that is more commensurate with usage.
We did the research, this community, and through Little League, their regional organizations, and the vast majority of communities that charge for use of a field, there aren't a lot, but the ones that do charge on a per field permit for a season, on the order of about $150. So, and it's, it's Lower Merion, it's other places, either they charge nothing or they charge a flat fee for the season for the field, for a given, designated field. And of course they monitor what, how much usage that league or program or team is using that field. But the schedules that we heard and that we've seen were on a flat fee basis.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Because part of what I heard was the scheduling that took place in the past. Who actually did the scheduling in the past?
There's a structure to the scheduling at between leagues. Between programs, between soccer, lacrosse, Little League. They basically meet together as part of the Radnor Athletic Association and work out any differences in terms of what their potential uses and needs are for the upcoming season.
Probably safe to say that a lot of it was repetition.
And it's repetition. It's like, this is what you did last year, any changes, anybody have any more needs?
So there's already a blueprint in place.
Right.
And
Then there's the level of the team and the games and the practices and all that. That's done at the league level.
Right. But the
Now,
actual...
the exception is where the usage involves sharing usage on a multiple day, multiple days of the week where there's multiple teams all using the same facility. The worst case scenario is the high school, and in the fall it's the turf fields, and in the spring it's the 90-foot diamonds. Joe Hammonds did the 90-foot diamonds. There's 3 90-foot diamonds at the high school. Joe Hammonds does a huge amount of work has done a huge amount of work to schedule 3 fields. He also adds on Odoricio Park in that scheduling because it's the other 90-foot diamond. So he's scheduling 4 fields and spending a lot of time because he's got like 2 or 3 adult leagues, other youth leagues, and then if the school wants to change because their game got rained out and want to do something else, he's got to then move everybody around. So when you talk about an individual doing a lot of work, he's basically doing 4 fields because they're high number of user groups going after the field. In the fall, Brooke Fritz has been doing it on behalf of soccer, and because she's at the school frequently and she's a coach at the school, she's there and she's able to get the communications going, and we have a Google Docs online spreadsheet and everything goes on there and changes go on there and everybody can visualize what's going on. But it's still very tedious, phone calls, this change, that change. It doesn't automatically notify Team B3 that now they can't use the field or they have to change it. A phone call has to be made, or emails have to be, mostly emails now. Emails have to be sent. So we have schedulers for the high-intensity, multiple-change situations, and those people rotate. Those people
Okay,
come
but
and
when
go.
you say "we have,"
The sports groups.
the sports groups.
Right.
So we have 2 public organizations who own the property, and then you have the scheduling is being done by the groups that are using it.
Right.
Is that a paid?
No.
Okay.
Now, at one time, we had somebody that was a registrar that was paid and was part of their job then became to do some of that.
Right.
So it was partially paid. The last several years, it's not been paid.
Okay, so part of the discussion, and I think I heard this from John, was if the scheduling is going to be done and done correctly, and it's no longer going to be done by Joseph, is it? The guy that did
Joe
the-
Hammonds did
Joe,
the
okay.
spring, right.
Okay. If it's no longer going to be done by him, it's going to have to be done by somebody. And if the sports groups are not willing to do the scheduling and continue the way it was, is there a reason why they wouldn't continue? Is it because they feel the grounds agreement knocked the rug up, the ground
No.
underneath them? Or-
It's where you have where the lines aren't real clear and there's a lot of sharing going on of the same facility. then you need a scheduler to work that out.
But is that what we're talking about, the cost of the scheduler, or have I missed that?
Because
No.
part of it is with the Radnor Athletic Association, they're having a baseball be both on township fields and on school
I
district
understand
fields.
that, and they're scheduling that. We're just saying, go ahead and use our field, you guys schedule them, is basically what I'm hearing.
Right.
Right,
And
you're
that
saying
works.
that, but the township's not saying that.
All right,
No,
what
no,
are you
no,
saying?
The
township
township
is-
has to deal with the other adult
Right.
or occasional users that want it for one day or a couple nights or whatever. And these, like the 90-foot diamonds that, there might be 10 Little League teams at that level, but then there's a Legion team, and there might be 2 Legion teams, and then there's a St. Catherine's
There's
team.
St.
and I mean,
Catherine's
there's
and
all these other
Agnes
groups that
and
come in, and
Valley
you wind
Forge
up
Military
with maybe
Academy.
8 different groups representing maybe 16 or 20 teams that all want the same 4 facilities. So then you need a scheduler to deal with that.
So is that an issue that the township's having, whether they should hire a scheduler to schedule the?
I don't know. I mean, Joe Hammonds was doing it gratis, and
I know,
other people were doing it before him.
right.
And Leah McVeigh had been doing it in our office for,
Right.
19 years.
I'm just trying to get a handle on what the issue is.
Chuck, those are the mechanics
Right,
that
right.
we've talked, and that's been that way. I did this scheduling for the Radnor Soccer Club at one time. It's been that way forever. Youth sports groups do it internally. The policies here are things such as permitting, fees, liability, damage. Those are the things that Tammy's, I believe.
Covering costs.
Right. The
staff.
things that we were asked to review.
Right.
Okay. But I don't think they want to relinquish, unless I'm mistaken, the scheduling, and they do it on a volunteer basis. It works great. For those other groups, right, corporate, individual, then that's covered by policy.
And you guys already do that. The township does that piece. The
Township does that through application
right.
by policy. So, there's mechanics of scheduling, policy for use of facilities. That's what we're being asked to review in your document, correct?
Yes.
We keep getting back
And
to,
then
we keep coming back
availability is
to,
another thing.
Joe, we keep coming back to scheduling, which we need to start with Tammy, Leo, and
Right.
Mike Friel.
We need to
So let's-
concentrate on this policy issue and the document we were given to review.
But we need to have the township and, that's just why we tabled it.
Thank you, Bob. Stay around.
Yeah, okay. All righty. That being said, Tammy, do you want to touch on the review of the short-term, mid-term, long-term goals?
Yes, and I will be as quick as possible.
Outstanding.
In late summer of 2011, the township manager asked the department heads and the staff to prepare a list of their short, mid, and long-term goals and objectives, essentially, that could guide day-to-day operations. And in an effort to come up with a list, I wanted to share it with you tonight, along with the status of many of the items that are included in there, one of which, of course, has to do with the fields and the administration, of course, being a very important short-term item for us. The list focuses on a variety of items. A lot are internally focused. For recreation specifically, they have to do with our department day-to-day operations and staffing, and of course programming and events, namely the expansion of those, of course, over the next several years at our many facilities that we have. The other category I'll kind of put these into is sort of forthcoming with discussions, I believe, that'll be taking place with the Board of Commissioners that will parallel into the 2013 preparations for the budget, which has to do with goals and direction, of course, on capital projects and maintenance, which I think is important, not only from the immediate needs of facilities, but the future goals and, of course, the operating needs for our facilities. So I'd like to ask that you take a look at those goals and objectives, review them. There's a few things that I'd like to ask, of course, and Mr. Norsini would most likely, I'm sure, agree, is to continue to gather input as that 2013 budget calendar unfolds in terms of developing what those capital and maintenance priorities and needs are with your input and your help. I think that those are most notable, in addressing the concerns in our parks, in our buildings, and the amenities that go along with all of those. Coming up with alternative funding mechanisms, perhaps through voluntary park contribution programs, naming right programs, things like that, helping us develop something that can come up with those additional revenue sources that can contribute towards the needs of the facilities, and work with us to do that. So further input, of course, is desired, should you see fit.
All righty. Anybody have any questions?
I have just one, and maybe Elaine, you might, and John might be able to help. I see that the development of the trail network to extend to Martha Brown's Woods is in the long-term column. Is that primarily financial, or is it more land acquisition, or is it just
Well,
kind
it's
of...
it's PennDOT, it's working with PennDOT. So that is the biggest hurdle.
PennDOT necessitates long-term by definition,
That
pretty
is-
much?
I mean, they're synonymous, aren't they? So really the whole effort to get the trail committee, the standalone trail committee, and, that's an effort to get some more energy and more devotion to that and pushing it forward. But the delay is primarily getting permission to extend that trail through Martha Brown's Woods.
Okay, anybody else? We did we took a look at some of the committees and have a listing of the revisions. We consolidated a couple, some that weren't really meeting on a regular basis or hadn't met in a while. We kind of maybe tabled, and just have is there a motion to approve the Park and Rec Board committees for the year 2012?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Before we
Discussion?
Yeah, I just want to have a quick question. Maybe if you could tell me where the consolidations were and what maybe you see as the goals of each committee, so that before we approve them, if that's all right.
Okay,
Finn, I have some of that.
go ahead.
The marketing committee was dissolved, and the idea there was that most of the focus with regard to marketing might be related to the indoor facility and looking for sponsorships and tying that in with the new policy that Tammy and her department put together. The signs committee, we thought, met pretty infrequently, didn't come up much, so we felt that we could fold that into the planning committee, which you're chairing, Joe. So we felt that we went and looked at the committee activities, saw where there was not a lot of activity for a particular group, and then saw where it would logically fit into the facilities, fields, planning, or trails.
That answer? Great. Is there a motion?
Move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Committee's approved. All right, let's go to shade tree report. School board report.
We're just happy to be here on the board and look forward to working with everyone. And
Chuck, welcome.
Thank you,
Susan,
Radnor.
welcome
Thank
back.
You.
Committee report.
The Fields Committee had several meetings related to the policy and other discussions with Tammy, and you can look that document over. We did also take a look at Bob's comments on the policy, and they're all very solid, and they'll be distributed probably within the next day or so to everybody.
Commissioners update.
Well, at the last meeting, I had been given 2 questions to address, and do you want me to do that tonight from Mike? And I can do that now if you'd like.
please.
Yeah, okay, so the first question was about, I'll do the easy one first. The first question was about Wayne Arts Center and their indebtedness to the township, and if that loan had been forgiven. And the answer is no, it has not been forgiven. In 1994, they participated in a grant, in a bond that the township took out and gave the proceeds to the library, part of it to the fire company, and part of it to the Wayne Arts Center. Last year, the year before, the Board of Commissioners forgave the library's part of what they owe. We did not forgive the fire company or the Wayne Arts Center, and they are both still on schedule with their payments and will pay off the rest of the loan. So that was an easy one.
Just curious, what's the outstanding balance from the Wayne Arts?
Well, it's clumped together, the two of them together, and it's about 180. So I believe that's, but I believe it. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but.
Okay.
So, and I don't know the share of each.
How much was forgiven for the library? Do we know?
250, I believe.
Wait,
Is that
let's
right?
be clear. It was forgiven, but they gave us back most of the money.
Right.
What does that mean? I don't understand what that means.
The way it worked was they hadn't spent all the money that bond issue afforded.
They did not? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Yes, they did not
Okay, all right.
spend it.
Okay.
So what we forgave really was the part that they had spent, which was 30% or so, Elaine?
Right, they had spent about, I think about 40% of it, and then they turned a large, I think the whole thing was 495 or 500. They had spent about two something, and we got back in the high twos. And then, so that is still earmarked for them to make improvements on the building, but they're not paying their payment of $30,000 a year anymore. So, all right, so the next question was about the Open Space Fund. And Mike had noticed that last year, for 2011, it's showing a deficit. So we're spending more out of it than we took in. And he just asked about that. So I don't want to bring you guys down into the weeds about this, but I did make some copies of what that I'm going to pass out. If you can take one and pass it along, there are 9, so there's one for everybody. To kind of explain to you what's in that account and what's going on with that account. Here. There's one for you guys. And let me just start by saying that account, the open space account, is funded with pretty much primarily one source of revenue, and that is our open space designation from the real estate transfer tax. So we get a real estate transfer tax every time there's a real estate transaction in Radnor, and 0.25% of that comes into the open space fund. And if you look, the first thing I handed out to you was a detail of that account. It's a 2-page document with a staple. And you'll see revenues on the first line, and that's how much comes in from that real estate tax every year. Used to be in 2007, you'll see it was almost $900,000. This last year, it was $524,000. That's the actual number. We had predicted, you'll see under forecast, we had predicted that it would be $539. It came in at about $524. So that's what comes into that every year. What we spend out of that every year is money for debt payments. So we take that money in and we pay for the bonds that we've taken out to buy open space. In a perfect world, those two numbers would be equal. And what has happened over the last 10 years is we paid more in debt payments out of this account than we owed in open space debt. So we were, in essence, we were subsidizing our just regular general fund debt with this account, because it was, I don't know why, but we did. We've stopped doing that, but that has been a practice that's gone on. Now, I also gave you 2 other documents just to kind of show you what we're paying out of this. The first is a chart showing what debt we have in '94, we approved taking out bonds of $10 million, and we have done that. We did it in 2 increments. In 1996, we took out $7,500,000, and then in 2002, we took out the rest of it. Those bond issues were reissued, and in 2009, they were clumped together in one. So all of our open space debt that remains is in one bond issue that was taken out in 2009. Which makes it very easy to, kind of see where that money's going. The last sheet I gave you is the debt payment schedule for our open space bond. So this is how much we owe every year for all of our open space debt that we already have from the $10 million that we've already spent. That money gets paid out of our open space fund. And you'll see this last year, this last year we owed $716,000 for our open space debt. But our open space revenues that came from the real estate transfer tax only equaled $524. So there's a deficit this year. And chances are, for the next, until 2017, chances are we'll have a deficit because those debt payments will continue to be in the low 700s until 2018. And unless we have big real estate booms, our income is going to be somewhere in the 5, 6, maybe 700 range over those next 4 or 5 years. Now, I just want to point out, if you look at the payment schedule that we have for this open space debt, in 2018, it halves. It goes down to about 400. We start paying in the 400s. And that's because one of the prior bond issues that we had issued is paid off. So we're only paying for the rest of it for the length of the bond, which is till the 2026. And once that happens in 2018, there'll be a surplus in that account because we'll be taking in more than 400 whatnot every year in the revenues. So that kind of explains the origin of our deficit this year, the situation where we're probably going to have a bit of a deficit coming out of this account for the next 4 years. And then when we finish paying off that section of the open space debt, it will be more in line and we'll have a surplus in that account.
Where's the funds come to pay the deficit? Where do they come from?
We have, there's a surplus in the account. I mean, that's not all there is in the account. If you look at, well, I don't think I have this document for you, but I didn't copy it for you. But if you look in our budget and look at the account itself, it's, we have $1 million, we started this year with over $1 million in that account. So it comes out of that. So the balance of that account will go down every year because we're going to eat into that balance by having this continual deficit for a few years. Unless, of course, our real estate transfer tax income goes up, and then, that deficit will be less, which, we're all hopeful it will. If you look back to 2007 or 2008, we were taking in $800,000, $900,000 a year in that tax. But for the last few years, it's been significantly lower, more, in the 500s. So,
Elaine, the upshot of that is it means we have less money to acquire open space for coming years because we're spending that down. That's what's happening there.
Exactly. Without acquiring more debt or finding another revenue source, yes, because that money, that revenue that we take from that real estate transfer tax is basically spoken for, paying for the debt of our old open space acquisitions, at least until 2026. And it's worth noting that in 2018, the burden gets significantly lower. So I hope that answers your questions. I didn't mean to be too detailed, but...
No, I think that was a nice job. Thank you, Elaine. We appreciate it.
No problem.
I also would like to add, we all owe Elaine thanks for her keen eyes because while we were doing budget development, she determined that there were $750,000 that had been taken out of the open space fund inappropriately, so we got it credited back to the fund.
Super, thank you. Steve, anything going on with Sulpizio?
Yes, thank you, actually, because you and Mr. Glenn had asked for a rough schedule of where we would be with Sulpizio. And so this month, we'll be meeting with Radnor Township School District to go over what our plans are, to make sure it's okay with them. Those plans are basically to bring the building back up to make sure it's up to code. That mainly, the bulk of that work is the roof, electrical, and plumbing. The way I see it structured, in Pennsylvania, if you have a project, if a single trade is worth more than $25,000, that trade's going to become a prime contractor. So I would assume this project's going to be a multi-prime with an electrical prime, general prime, and a plumbing prime. Also, over $25,000 prevailing wages kicks in. As far as the schedule, after meeting with the school district, I'll be working with Ray Daly in our codes department. You know, we don't have architectural drawings for the building, and I'm trying to avoid spending a lot of money to do that. I'd rather put the money towards the work. So I'll be working with Mr. Daly in preparing specifications for the bidding documents. Would hope to approach the board in the time frame of the March 23rd or April 9th Board of Commissioners meeting to request to receive bids. If that's passed, we would receive bids hopefully prior to the June 18th meeting and request to award at that meeting, and then would begin construction. Now, one of the things I haven't gotten to the point of is talking with the school district and talking with Tammy about the scheduling and the use, because some of this work would be intrusive to use down there. Another thing I'd like to mention, you know, at the Board of Commissioners did approve the 2012 discussion items for the 2013 budget plan meeting dates. This is online, and this has specific dates for different areas and topics for the 2013 budget. For instance, next week is stormwater quality management. But really what I'm getting at is in May, specifically at May 24th, we have township facilities and infrastructure. Not that the infrastructure so much applies to this board, but the facilities do. So right now, remember I told you we were categorizing and trying to quantify everything we have. We'll bring that to this board to let you see it. I'll email that to you folks. But we need your input as to where you think you'd want to go. You could attend this meeting. You could provide us with information. But that's an important part, because that facilities meeting, it's not just this facility, it's the Willows. It's the Willows Cottage. It's Kreuzberg. It's all that. Restrooms, the whole 9 yards, our parks, open space. So we would look to this board for knowledge, history, and some goals, which way you'd like to move on these things.
Okay.
So that's where we stand.
Great, thank you. Anybody have any questions? Just real quick, last month we had some folks come in raising some issues on the weed or the roundup on the trail. Any further discussions with Paul and or where we might be heading with that?
We'll be meeting with her, the young lady that was here, next week.
Great.
Just to get things started, and then, you know, we'll be back to the board.
Great.
After that.
That's a good segue, because I would like to recommend that someone from this board, someone from EAC, and someone Board of Health work with Steve and his people. I mean, if I could just make the decision myself, I'd do away with the use of Roundup. But there are implications for that, financial implications especially. So I would like to see, before I make any decision, some appraisal of cost benefit. You know, I've already asked a couple people who are expert in hazardous materials and those types of things to give me some input on Roundup itself, so I can weigh all that. So if you would reach out to those other two boards and see if you can't get together.
Okay. Steve, you'll let us know how you make out with the resident and kind of maybe fill us in on how that goes, and we'll.
Right. I think that's just a very small first step.
Okay.
In this process.
All right. John, Elaine, any input or update on filling the void that we have on this board?
It was advertised Monday night.
Okay.
In my ward, I've already had 2 people inquire
Okay.
about it, so.
All right, just checking to see.
Yep.
All righty. Any old business?
I have an item. In our last meeting, we made a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners that the Recreation Department be given permission to discuss a proposal for coordinating the scheduling and use of facilities with the Radnor School District. Was anything, what's the process of us making a motion, Tammy? Does anything happen, or did anything happen with that motion?
I spoke with our manager about that. We had a long talk about this, and I'm not sure the Board of Commissioners needs to authorize that. I mean, I think it's a good idea. I think if you all think it's a good idea, that you and Tammy should go ahead and do that. I mean, he felt, Bob said, that's great. That's, we have at it. That's a good idea. Let's have them, make some progress on this. So my input would be, go ahead and set it up, work with Tammy. That's not the type of thing that we need to bring to the Board of Commissioners to authorize you to do. This is what you're authorized to do anyway. You're the board to come up with solutions and meet and talk these things through.
Well, we weren't recommending that the board, great, and I'm glad to hear you say that, Elaine. That's a wonderful message. Thank you. We were more wondering if Tammy and her department was empowered to talk with our fine colleagues over at the school district to kind of plot out how scheduling takes place going forward.
Empowered by...
And go a step further, I mean, if you had discussions with Bob, did Bob give the okay for Tammy to do that?
Yeah.
Yes, he has, and I have had
All right.
good conversations with Leo, as I always do. So I think he's been great to, keep me informed. He had let me know that the Facilities Committee was meeting on Tuesday. He talked to me about some of the, ways that went and some of the discussion items. So we are talking.
Do you feel you're close to a resolution with the scheduling problem?
That I think we need to go back and discuss more heartily.
And what do you feel in the previous discussion that didn't allow you to get toward a concrete resolution?
Well, the piece that I learned tonight with understanding that the school district might be thinking that we're still handling the field scheduling was news to me. So that is the first piece of discussion for tomorrow morning that I'll be having with Leo.
That's great. Thank you, Tammy.
And then the discussion will unfold from there.
Anybody have any other thoughts? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.